Hello everyone! In this video we're going to be talking through bringing assets from Quixel Megascans or anywhere else into your project and populating your scene with them. So let's hop over into Unreal and get started. Alright, so here I am in Unreal at the end of my last video, which was about painting on textures using landscape materials onto your scene. So in this video what I want to do is take a look at my references again and start to add some of the details, the assets, the objects into the world. So as I've said before, I want to kind of create a combination of this scene as well as this scene. So I really like the way that the rocks kind of build up on each other and blend into the hillside. So maybe I want to bring in some rocks to add to my hillside. And I also like these sort of heathery flowers, adding a little bit of brown and color to the scene. If brown is a color, red, there's a little bit of a red going on there. But then I also like the fact that there's some trees interspersed here, a sort of little grove over there, and some more bushy, noticeable grass, especially around the river. So I'm going to go into Quixel and start to look for assets that might work in this case. So let's go into Unreal again and open up once again our Quixel bridge. All right, we've seen this before when we went to surfaces and brought in some materials, but this time what I want to do is go to either assets or plants. I think first, before I start looking at the plants, I'm going to try and find some rocks. So let's see under the 3D assets, nature, whether there's anything that might look good for my case. So just browsing around, there's a couple of rocks here that are beginning to look interesting. I'm not being super picky with the type of rock I bring in. Obviously, if you're going for a very specific location, ooh, these mossy rocks, that looks like it's going to do well, since my scene has a lot of moss in it. But if you're being super particular about your location and the type of things that you can encounter in that location, then obviously you'll want to be a bit more discerning than how I'm being right now. But after the last video, I really want to make this one quite quick. So I'm just being a little bit haphazard about this. Bring in enough to fill the scene and not worry too much about the specific details. Okay, I have a bunch of rocks. And now I'm also going to go into the, instead of 3D assets, 3D plants, and bring in some grasses, just thatching grass. Some of these look good. Don't forget you can always click on one and expand the details a little bit. Okay, we've got various grasses and shrubs. I was also looking for some shrubs. Elderberry. Oh, I've already got that downloaded. Excellent. Maybe I'll look under meadow. Got some boxwood. And maybe I'll pick one or two with some color. I think I have some hydrangeas downloaded already, just to see what it would look like if I add a little bit of color to the scene. Ooh, this Nordic coastal grass looks interesting. Looks like it might add that brown reddishness that I was hoping for. Anyway, I think I'm going to call it there and hop over into... Oh, I guess it's still downloading a bunch of stuff. While this is downloading, I will also say one thing you won't be able to find in Bridge is if you search for tree under collections. If you search for tree, you'll get a lot of different variations and a lot of dead trees. But what you won't find is actual sort of big, large trees. Trees in general are already, you see we have the bottom of trees, but not the full tree itself with all the leaves. Trees in general are very difficult to do in rendering engines, in real-time rendering engines like Unreal. And it takes a lot of work, and often they're kind of cheated and stylized in some certain way. And they're very difficult to do photorealistically. One of the more common ways that you might hear about is a program called Speed Tree, where you kind of build out your own trees and then import those into Unreal. But that is a paid program, and I don't really want to focus on that as in this course because it costs quite a pretty penny. And I think there are other ways to get trees into the project. So one thing that is on the horizon is this Megascans, which is the what you see in front of us, all of these photorealistically scanned assets, is working on something called Megascans Trees. So if you search for, where is it? If you search for Megascans Trees, probably not the first link, but the second link that comes up, Megascans Trees are now in early access. This has been in early access for quite a while, but they've basically taken the same idea as with the plants and the surfaces and the objects, and they're trying to achieve that with trees as well. So it's very promising first results, but it's not fully released yet. They're in early access, and they only have one tree pack available, which is a sort of European-style tree. You can watch this video, which will show you sort of how to get started and different things that you can do with this pack. But if you click the European Black Elder Pack link, it'll take you to this free asset on the asset store, the Unreal Marketplace, and then just hit Open in Launcher, which will take you to the Epic Games Launcher, and I've already added mine. All right, once you are in your Unreal Launcher, you might have to download the project, purchase it or whatever, but it's free, so you shouldn't have to purchase it, but you might have to click Add to Cart or whatever. And once you have it, then you will be able to click Add to Project. The problem is that at the moment, the Megascans Trees is not supported in Unreal Engine 5. So if you want to use a project version that is fully supported, you'd have to go back to an older version of Unreal. But what you could do is click Show All Projects, and that will unlock your project, Unreal Engine 5. But you'll get this big red error message that says not compatible with version 5. So then you'll just have to click a older version of Unreal. If you don't have a version installed, you might need to go to the launcher and install an older. Where would you go to library? Click plus engine version. Choose an older version. I would suggest the most recent 4.27, which I have already, so it doesn't show me that. And then install that. It will take a while, so this is a lot of work just to get trees in your project. But then once you have the trees, or once you have that older version of the engine installed, then you can go to your Megascans asset, add to project, show your project, choose your project, your natural aesthetics project, but then use an older version. And this will use the older version to import that asset into your project. So it's a lot of work, and it's a roundabout way. Hopefully the folks at Quixel will upgrade this asset to Engine 5 at some point, because this is not the usual way that you do it. Usually you just click Add to Project, and then it all works out fine. Once you've done all that, and you've added this content to your project, you should then see in your content folder a new folder called Black Elder, which is this Megascans pack that we've just imported. And then under Geometry, you have two options, Pivot Painter or Simple Wind. Pivot Painter is like a complex way of simulating wind, so probably doesn't run very well, especially on lower end machines. Simple Wind is a bit more simple. And then you have access to a bunch of the trees in this pack. I think they're different in the Pivot Painter trees. So these trees will use a Simple Wind system, and the Pivot Painter trees will be a bit more complex. At the moment, I think I'm just going to stick to Simple Wind. And you can click on any of these trees, which are all meshes, and simply drag that into your project. It will take a while the first time you drag one of these in, because it has to prepare, as you can see in the bottom of the screen, it has to prepare a bunch of shaders and materials, because these are very complex assets. But once all of that is done, then we'll have access to these trees. There we go. Once you have your asset in the project, you should be able to move it around. Right now, I went to the top. I have a little magnifying glass, which I can show you. This little, the 3 arrows pointing outwards. And there's an option for surface snapping, and there's an option for rotate surface normal. I've unchecked rotate to surface normal, but I've checked surface snapping. And what that does is that allows me to move the tree around, and it'll stick to the ground, wherever the ground is. So that's what surface snapping does. And if you click rotate to surface normal, then it will rotate to the kind of slope of the ground. I don't want that for trees, because trees usually grow up and not sideways. But for my other assets, maybe I do want that. So I'm going to uncheck rotate for surface normal at the moment, reset that rotation, and then just click on the little dot. Let me use my magnifying glass. The little dot in the center of this gizmo and move the tree around. So I'll put that tree over there, and maybe a little smaller tree. Oh, that's going to take a while to import as well. Great, now we've got a little smaller tree, and maybe there's something like a little bush in there to line the path. Anyway, I'm not dressing the scene just yet. I'm just importing some assets. So that is as far as I'll go with the trees for now. We will come back to those trees in a little bit. But in the meantime, let's go back to Quixel Bridge, because at this point, I think all of the things that I selected earlier will have downloaded. That was a very long segue to say that you won't find trees in Quixel Bridge. If you would like trees in your project, you'll probably have to use a separate external library outside of Bridge. Megascans is one of them, but also the other thing that I'll just mention is if you do go to the marketplace and search for trees, there are plenty of other tree packs that you can browse and bring into your project. Some of them are paid for, some of them are free. And also on any of the sort of usual places where you get 3D assets, you'll find all sorts of trees, both paid for and free as well. So there are many options for trees, but it's just a little bit more hunting down than things in Quixel Megascans. Okay, so anyway, we're back. We're back to Quixel. We're back to our rocks and our shrubs. That was a really long segue just for trees. So I'm going to select some of these and bring them in. I won't be too discerning. Yes, I think I will take a dead log. Sure, why not? So with all of those selected, I will hit add, and they will be imported into my Unreal Engine. And now under my content Megascans folder, where we had just surfaces previously, we now have 3D plants and 3D assets. So the assets is all of these rocks that I brought in, and maybe some dead trees as well. Maybe not. And 3D plants are the plants that I brought in. Okay, so earlier we threw in some trees by dragging them into the project and adding them that way. And we can do the same with our rocks as well. So let's find a nice rock. This is a nice rock, which I'm going to, let me delete this tree for now. And I want to make this area here kind of like a nice rocky area, a sort of place to sit and relax and enjoy the stones. So I'm going to drag that in and maybe scale it up a little bit, rotate it around. I'm using the hotkeys, which are W to move, E to rotate, and then T to scale. But you can also click these buttons up here in the top of your screen. And I'll add a couple more of these, and then I'll move on to a different variation. It's surprising what you can do with one single asset if you scale it and rotate it around a lot. One single rock can serve many different purposes. One other thing on just moving and scaling things, by default the gizmo is aligned to the world axis. So as I move the gizmo, as I rotate the object, the gizmo stays the same. But if you click the let me use my magnifying glass. If you click the little world icon, then the axis of the gizmo, the space of the gizmo, changes to the local space of the object. So as you move this around, now the gizmo aligns with the object itself. So that's a useful way of just changing the way that you rotate and move things. And if I move now, it's aligned to the axis of the object as well. Whereas if I change that back to the world, then it's aligned to the axis of the world. Okay, so that's one rock. Let's add another in. Let's add this type of rock, but he's tiny, so I'm going to increase his scale there. We've got mossy boulder, who's also tiny, so let's make that bigger. And then one of these Icelandic rocks, which I think I'm going to rotate that way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good enough for now. One thing I will also do is very, very quickly, just to throw back to last video, I'm going to take the paint tool and paint a little bit of sand around here. No, not sand. Undo that. Lighter grass, just to add a little bit of patchiness to where these rocks live. Maybe a little bit of wet mud as well. Cool. Just to add some variation. Okay. Cool. So that's one way to add objects to your scene. Just simply drag them in, then click on them, scale them up. Oh, that didn't work out as I intended it to. But drag an object in, click on it, move it, scale around, and place it. And that is the sort of traditional way for adding things if you want super fine control over exactly where they live and how they appear.